Hi, I'm Jonathan Russell in LA. I'm a soil scientist at Cornell University, and we're going to continue this soda bottle soil science project that we've been going on with. And I want to show you the results for our germination test. It's not actually pretty because we had some fungus take over. But first I wanted to show you this sort of clouche. So I've got the petri dish bottom, the soda bottle bottom, with the clouche top, which is basically the soda bottle top. I'm going to open this up. In this container, we actually, on germination rate on day 7 was 5, but that's actually not really true. When I open this up, you'll see what I mean. On day 4, we basically had fungus start to take over. So this germination rate is really day 5, and at day 5 we had 5 germination seeds germinate, which makes me think that if we hadn't had the fungus take over, we'd have a larger number of germination. But let me open this up so you can see. And I've talked about this online, and part of this is that it's pretty hard in a humid, moist environment with seeds that haven't been washed. It's kind of hard to avoid fungus and rot. You can see that a number of these guys germinated fairly well, nicely. But then basically rot took over. At that point, you're pretty much sort of have to stop and say, okay, I've got this number at whatever date, and call it a day on these guys. We're not going to be planting these guys directly, so at this point you're pretty much done with this. They start to smell, so you might want to sort of throw them out. I would suggest not throwing them out in your room. Basically put them into the bathroom or flush them down the toilet or something like that, because they do smell fairly bad. But this is basically the clouche idea, keep this closed on top, and so it creates this sort of micro environment. Now in this case it didn't turn out all that well, but it's usually a fairly good approach to sort of maintaining a micro environment for your plants. I'm going to put this over to the side. Now this same problem that we had pretty much at day 5, pretty much all of the petri dishes, starting day 5, we had quite an explosion of fungus. Now part of what we probably should have done is that we probably should have washed the seeds before we put them in there. We also probably should have sort of vented them every once in a while, let the humidity sort of reduce. I'm going to open up this one. This is the raised bed. This is and the reason I'm opening this one up is so that you can see the germination. The reason I'm raising this one in particular, this is the soil that I have in the soil column, so you can sort of see the success. I should also add that I pulled this one from that as well. This was the picture that I showed you on Monday. But you can see that there's a lot of rot that's been going on in there. The germination for this was actually 6, so on day 5, I actually had 6 seeds germinating in this one. These guys were less, well, they were, in some cases they were just as successful. They were a little bit slower on the germination, but just opening these guys up, it smells so bad that I'm just going to sort of keep them closed. But just so you can see what the effect that we did in fact get some germination in these guys, and that's actually what's most important about this project at the moment. We basically wanted to have an understanding about how successful the compost was, or the compost tea, by making compost and it's putting the seeds in them to sort of see how the seeds would perform. Obviously, we had some failure component here, but the compost, when we take a look at that chart of all of yours and all the seed successes, we'll have a fairly good idea about which composts are actually more complete or more, I don't want to say better, but are basically better than others when it comes to germination. So the other reason why we want to do this germination is we want to have some idea about what the germination rate was of the seeds, because this week we're basically going to be planting those seeds in our soil columns, and we're going to be watching them for the next 5 or 6 weeks, and we wanted to have some measure of the success. Now, this is a petri dish of the dried seeds. They're fairly small. Rachel basically put a bunch of seeds into a little beaker last night and let them just put some water in with them, and you can see how they've swollen up. And that's a really good sign, because that means that they're still sort of fairly active. I pulled 4 of those seeds out, and these are the 4 seeds that we're going to be planting in our column. but I wanted you to see this one particular thing right here. You'll note that it's opening up very nicely. Actually, all four of these have germinated, but this is a really good example of that. It's opening up, the root is coming out, and so these 4 seeds we're going to be planting in the pot. Now, the reason I chose 4, I probably don't have to use that many, but I basically want to make sure that I have at least 1 seed grow. And so with the raised bed soil, I basically had a number. With the raised bed soil, I basically had a number of 6. And so with 50% germination, I probably could just put 2 seeds in there, but I'm going to guarantee that I have at least 1 plant growing up. And so I'm going to put these guys away. We had an interesting discussion about this seed. If you open it up, you can sort of see the cotyledons. Right between the cotyledons, you can actually see the leaves are starting to emerge inside there. And the thought was, why not just sort of give it a chance? So I'm going to take 1 of these seeds away, keep this one in, and we'll have 1 of it. We'll put this one in, and then 3 of these guys into the pot, into our soil column. Soil column you guys have built at this point. Okay. What I'm going to do, because I don't want to disturb the rooting that's happening in these seeds, what I'm going to do is basically use this is a palette knife, but I'm going to use it as a dibble. I'm going to basically push it into the soil to make a little hole that I can drop the seeds into. It's okay if they're not in the center. I'm basically going to drop the seeds into that hole and then just sort of cover it up. Okay, I'm going to start with this guy. I don't think it really matters which way you drop them in. Sort of set it down in there. The rule of thumb with seeds is basically whatever the length or width of the seed is, that's the depth at which you plant it. I'm going to put them a little bit shallower because we're sitting in this sort of soil column. Just sort of drop them in. Drop it in to each one of those holes. Take this guy, be fairly gentle with the root. Let it actually go in. Okay, and then just sort of cover them up just gently. The other thing is, because these are bean seeds, they're going to start climbing. These aren't really bush beans, more whole beans. I made this jury-rigged sort of climbing tripod for them to sort of move in. I'm going to push this in before they start germinating so that I don't have to worry about damaging roots once they start growing. Just enough in so that it can climb and grow. Basically, I'm just going to cover these guys up. It's the palette knife here. Cover them up. Not too deep. This guy, because it's already germinating out, I'm going to leave it a little bit exposed. That part of the seeds are basically going to become the cotyledons, and the seed itself is going to actually come out as the root, the shoot part of it, and the leaves sort of come out in between it. And that's basically what we're going to be doing. Now, the other thing that you should realize is that you guys at this point have an idea about how much water you need to add. You know how much available water is in this system, and when you start watering, you're basically going to want to water just up to that available water component. Otherwise, you're going to have a lot of water coming out. I would keep the bottom on, and because we want the water to come out, I'm going to pull this out. I should have done this before. Make sure you take the top off the bottom. Sounds strange, but make sure you take the top off the bottom and just sort of set it right back in there. This you're going to want to set near a window or a bright light. Indoor lights aren't all that great, but a window would be really good. Because we're only going to be following it for 5 or 6 weeks, you don't have to worry about it being out in the sunlight. Try to prevent it from getting overheated. If I didn't have the trellis that I sort of put in here, I probably would keep the cloche on for a couple days. But if it's near a window or something like that, you probably don't want to put the cloche on because it will overheat. Water, maintain it every day. Just pour a little bit in, let it drip out a little bit, not a lot, to maintain that moisture content in there. And that's basically what you're going to be doing this week. I'll put a full write-up on Canvas so you guys can take a look at it.